And you're joining I need to confirm because we've been scheduling this for a while. You're joining us from Greece?
Greece, yes. We just got back from, oh gosh, a crazy 2 weeks of travel. We did Ireland, Scotland, Iceland, and
Oh.
London. Finally now back home in Greece.
I'm gonna have to ask you in a bit how you plan those adventures because it is so many things you pack in, and I think there was even
Yes.
a van involved and part of
There
this?
was. Yeah, we did van life in Scotland for a whole week as well. I feel like that was probably one of the most challenging things to plan because we've always done, we go to hotels, we go to Airbnbs, but this time it was like, oh, we have to like plan an actual route that we're going to take and where we're going to stay overnight. And so it honestly was seriously one of the best trips I've ever taken. And I can't recommend van life enough for people who want to explore new countries. So more van life is coming in the future for us.
Oh, I'm excited about this, and people should know too if they don't already follow you, you're also doing this as a family, so it's not just the
Yeah.
2 of you doing it in the van.
Yes, 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 definitely.
When I look at what you're doing, if someone just goes to your Instagram today, it's amazing the adventures you're having, the stuff you're sharing. And you wouldn't know that it's relatively recent that you're living this life. So can you talk a little bit about that transition? Because I know a lot of people listening are interested in nomadic life, but also they're interested in this idea of like, I have this job, regular job, and I see myself doing something different that maybe is not so chaining me to one place.
It has been a roller coaster. I think, it's crazy to think that this has happened in the past 2 years, but this was something that we've always talked about, me and my husband, that we wanted to do. Then I remember watching this Netflix documentary about a couple from Berlin who ended up renovating a bus to travel around the US. And I don't know, I think just like this idea of like having this freedom to be able to travel. And I've always wanted to travel. I used to watch Samantha Brown, for those who know, on the Travel Channel as a little kid, and I thought she had the coolest job just going around to all these different countries, and I thought, "I wanna do that one day." But of course, it's just one of those things where I had no idea how does one even begin to do that, and I think a lot of people, even though social media consumes so much of our life now, a lot of people kind of forget it's still relatively new, like, it's still such a new concept for people to be content creators and to be influencers, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. Started actually my journey, to being a social media influencer through food. I was really interested in healthy eating and veganism for ethical reasons, for sustainability reasons. And I decided to just kind of start sharing online about that. And really the funny thing about that is that I really wanted to do travel at the time, but I had so much debt that there was no way I was going to be traveling. So I thought, okay, what can I do within my means now with the resources I have? And that was I really enjoyed cooking and showing people how to eat plant based. So I started my blog. That was back in 2018 as well. And I just kind of started growing a following from there. And I learned so much about how to be successful on social media, learning about the algorithms to, working with brands, how to negotiate for myself, photography, videography, all of those things I learned through that. And it's really helped me transition so quickly into really moving from food into the travel niche because I had had so much exposure to social media and how to be successful in there prior to making that transition between the two niches. And it was honestly kind of like seamless on how that happened because I had already had people who were following me and I had started to kind of integrate traveling and also eating plant based while traveling. But the biggest catalyst, I think, into living this lifestyle was that I, found out I was pregnant back in 2021. On my 30th birthday, I was super excited. The reality set in of like what it is to be a mother in the US. When I had to beg for maternity leave paid, even after I'd been with the company almost 2 years. And then I got hit with a $10,000 hospital bill, even though I delivered naturally with no no epidural, no true intervention other than having to be induced and no complications. So I was just thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what do mothers do, when they've got to have a cesarean, when their baby has to go to the NICU, all of these things. I couldn't imagine what the hospital bill is at that point. And then, of course, there was just very little support after having my daughter. Had really bad, nobody talks about postpartum anxiety.
Mm.
And a lot of people talk about, having postpartum depression, but I had a lot of anxiety and a lot of rage, honestly. And I feel like a lot of women don't talk about that either, but I was really angry. There's no resources. And I started seeing women, especially women of color, living abroad in places like Mexico and Thailand and Europe, and just living a softer life. All of those things that seemed so inaccessible to me, even though I was doing really well. We were making over $100,000 a year. We had a beautiful place in Austin, Texas. I mean, we had everything we needed, but yet it was still like we were struggling every single day. And I never saw my husband either. He was constantly working. He was a restaurant manager, so it was very demanding. And we were just literally ships passing each other through the night because we were trying to save on childcare costs by working opposite shifts from each other. And I just thought, I've worked so hard for this life and like I can't even enjoy it. If it was up to me, we would have just moved to Mexico.
I want to make sure to quickly point something out, though, here, which I hope listeners see and hear from your journey, which is I already knew a little bit, of course, but hearing it from you is really special because there's certain things that I think anyone in the US or who's left can appreciate here. But I want to back up even further to what you did, which you kind of just talked over as if it was so easy and natural, but it's not. This idea that you took something that you really wanted to do, which was travel, and you found a way to do it through food first and you created the space that you wanted. And I think a lot of people listening have ideas of what they want to do, but they don't have the resources to do it. Knowing you can create a segue in is brilliant what you did. Starting with food, I'm imagining at home, and then taking it to food with travel when you could do it, and then pivoting fully into travel. And like all your skills come with you. And you're really good proof of that because if someone looks at your socials, they wouldn't know that it's been 2 years you've been doing the travel. They would have no
Yeah,
idea.
yeah,
It really is something like,
absolutely.
let's not gloss over how incredible that is that you use those skills to do it. And that you also, I imagine initially you were working a full time job, you were saying at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this whole time I've always worked a full-time job remotely. And it's one of the things that, even I coach my clients on is, they want to break into having their own business. And I'm like, hey, there is still really good things in having a sustainable paycheck. Because even though money can be great, having your own business, it is great and it's unlimited money that you can make. There's still peace in having a paycheck coming in consistently. And also too, being able to work remotely gave me the time and the space because I didn't have to have a, 2-hour commute every day to and from work. So there's I feel like a lot of benefits to that. And I still am working a 9 to 5, but of course it's something that allows me to travel full time. But I think people kind of write that off. There's so much like be your own boss, start your own business. And I'm totally an advocate of that as well too. There's a lot of beauty in that transition as well too. It's okay to be able to do both.
Well, there's no wrong way to be an entrepreneur. And I think there's a lot of people that like to be the purist about, well, if you're going to do it, then you need to let go of everything and just focus on the business. And I did that. And I will tell you, I would never recommend that to anyone. It takes so much longer. You really, unless you're set up with the reserves to do it, it takes so much longer than if you do more of a hybrid model. And I think the key is what you were saying and what you help with clients is if you can find a way to have some sort of income that does not tie you to a physical place. That is the biggest first step.
Even too with, moving abroad, I think people are also kind of surprised that, we didn't just, do this overnight. We had a place that we kept in the US, even as we were traveling abroad. And then at that time where we said, okay, like we're ready to take that leap now, we can rip the band-aid off and really start living this nomadic lifestyle. But I mean, that took over, 6 to 9 months for us to make that transition. And I think people we see so many people on social media, but it's a very, very small percentage of people who are literally saying, I'm selling it all and I'm and I'm leaving. I'm buying a one-way ticket.
Now that honest I've spoken to a lot of them now, and most of those people, it's either the case of they're happy to not do the work for several months and live very, minimalist, right, as they go on, Or it's the case of they spent the 6 months to the 9 months preparing, and I don't think a lot of people tell that story because it's not a sexy one. It's not sexy to say, "Oh, I decided to go do this adventure, and then I took 6 months to get my affairs in order."
Yeah, yeah. I think, it's hard. It's even hard, like, as you're in the moment, because it feels like you're taking a step back. Life is very much like that. Sometimes you're going to take two steps forward, one step back, and it's okay because you're still going to be working in the right direction as long as you're putting your energy towards something. But I think we see those things on social media and think, okay, I got to go all in, all or nothing.
We're not advocating that here. We're advocating sustainability. I'm curious kind of more about the logistical and the strategy side of what you've done because it does seem like it was, and you said, pretty effortless to pivot into what you're doing now. What do you think is the key stuff around the socials and around creating a brand like you've done that really helped you to do this? What do you think are fundamentals, things that you would talk to people about that you've got to have this in order or you've got to think about this? This will make your life so much easier.
Honestly, I find that one of the best things that I have been able to do is to fill the gaps in the market. And
Mm.
one of the things that I found from my journey is that I saw people who didn't look like me traveling the world full time with their family. I saw people who had homes and assets to sell. And I'm a broke millennial. So I decided, okay, I don't have any assets to sell. I didn't have a home to Airbnb or rental property, and we didn't have any of that. We had our cars, and that was it. That's the only thing that we, well, somewhat owned because we still had a loan on it. How can I create content for people who are in this position like me, who want to do what I'm doing, that feel like, oh, it's impossible? We actually took a van and we converted it, and then we basically flipped that van, sold it. We took that profit and used it to continue to pay off debt so that my husband could leave his job. There's all these different things that I started thinking about. Okay, I need to really talk to people who are looking for those resources that nobody's creating those resources for. And I want to give them this information, at least to get them started so that they can create a plan for themselves.
You tapped into a couple different markets and niches that were overlooked. So, one, I agree with you. There's a certain look to most people who are nomading, especially as a family. Even without a family, I imagine, like what you said, is there's so many people that want to do this life or dip their toes in or something, but they feel like it's not accessible because what you do exists, but there are people charging thousands of dollars for it. There's so much, like you said, coaches, which are always positioning for that super high ticket, really like exclusive. This is how you make your money. And I understand there's a place for that in certain things, but also, like you've shown, when people go to your Instagram, they'll see there are a lot of people, a huge market who are looking for something more accessible. And I don't think that people should exclude that just because it's not as quick as getting, the six figures with your one launch of 10 people.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And I've been able to launch my ebook, which has so much information for people in there. And it's, $7. And I've had so many coaches go, oh my God, why would you give so information for that? But
Because you're having impact as well, and I think that's the one thing that like, there's different levels of people listening. So there's people who are just starting and they don't know what to do. There's people who are really successful, but even those people having conversations with them, and I'm sure you have to because you meet everyone when you're nomading, is that a lot of times they feel like they're missing something because they've gotten the money, but they don't have the purpose and the impact. A huge part of that is because what they have, their wisdom, they're not providing it in a way that's also accessible. I'm not saying you have to do that exclusively, but like you have a podcast, right? You have a $7 ebook. These are easy ways that you can offer some value that are really important and change people's lives. And I feel like that's such an underrated part of entrepreneurship.
yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And it's been so amazing to just, hear people's stories. A family reached out to me a couple months ago and they said, thank you so much. Like, we just recently sold our house. We're going to be doing 3 months in Portugal with our kids. You've inspired us. And just like, whoa, like just knowing that, me and my family, like that we're making that impact. You'll never know truly the impact And one of the things too that I tell people if they want to break into social media, I didn't have the means to travel either when I wanted to transition into travel. But then also I, started doing travel by just talking about travel. I had been in the travel industry for 10 years and I just started sharing my knowledge of what I knew to help people. And that opened up the door for me to grow my Instagram and my TikTok following and also so many other travel opportunities just because I was talking about travel. I wasn't all I had to do was put a green screen up of wherever I was talking about and I could, and I could talk about it and I did the research on it and all these things. And I am a big advocate of like, use what's in front of you as much as you possibly can. Use the knowledge that you have to like create additional income streams for yourself because everybody has a skill set. Everybody has something that they're interested in or they're passionate about.
I agree. There's a huge opportunity, and some people are way more skilled at it than others, and you're definitely one of them. What do you think is it that allows you to have people so engaged with your content, to really be responding, to be commenting? Because while there's not many people in the exact market you have, there are others, and you're definitely at the top of them. You're doing it incredibly well. So what do you think is the reason why, or what is it that you've consciously done in order to make people feel more invited into your space?
People talk about authenticity, and I think that's also important, but I think transparency is also very important. I've always been transparent throughout our entire journey, especially right now in like the state of the world and the economy and inflation. Like, I think people find a lot more peace and like comfort in knowing that, I'm being really open and honest about where I am in my financial journey. And I think that that makes people feel so much more comfortable even just consuming my content, engaging in my content because they see that, oh, okay, I'm not alone.
There's a lot of relatability. I see that so much that when you go on there, you don't feel ashamed or you don't feel like the judgment because I'll be forthright. Like for me, I didn't get out of debt till age 35. And I think that's the case for a lot of Americans. And
Yeah.
even people who are doing really well in their businesses, we don't talk about how long it took to get out of that. And that you might have a certain revenue, but you still have the debt. And there's so much shame around it, which I love that you are transparent about it because we need to talk about it. People need to know that you're not the only one that has this thing hanging over your head, but also, which is what you do and I love, is also it doesn't mean it has to stop you from going after what you really want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like the biggest hack for us right now has just been going to affordable countries. We went and spent a month in Albania in July, and I'm like, oh, I'm coming back here because my money stretched real far there.
I think there's so much to be said for creativity and how you approach your life. You can do it in a different way. Like you don't need to stay in the town or the city where you are. You don't need to stay in the home the way you're doing it. If you have a more flexible job, it allows you to have time away. And let's be real, like even if you're abroad for a couple months, you're saving compared to back in the States. So there's so
Yes.
much options, but we get locked in, don't we, to like there's only one way to do things. And I remember growing up and hearing that also millennial. This is how it goes, this is the next step, and this is what you need to go and achieve. But that dream is so outdated the way it's structured.
Absolutely. And even too, I love that you also hit on that as well, is like I find that when I talk to people, the biggest thing that's actually the hardest part is the starting this transition. And when I say starting it, I mean downsizing, letting go of things. We have such a mindset of our worth is tied into what we have, what we don't have. And that's really hard. It was really hard for us when we first said, okay, we want to go abroad, but we're not in a space where we can just sell it all and let it all go. We've got to take our two-bedroom apartment. We've got to downsize to a one-bedroom apartment. People thought we were crazy. What do you mean? You just had a baby. How are you going to be in a one-bedroom apartment? I'm like, look, I'm going to make it work. And we did. We turned our living room into a bedroom. We turned our bedroom into a nursery for our daughter so that she had her, her space. And we made it work. And I think so many people, people could look at that and go, oh man, they've fallen on hard times. But I'm like, no, I got to go to Portugal for 3 months. My husband got to take off for 3 months. But I think our identity is so caught up in that it's really hard for people to go, right. I'm going to have to make some of those sacrifices because people are thinking, well, what are people going to think about me? What are people going to think about our financial situation? You know, if I move in with my parents, if I, get a roommate, if I, well, all of those different things. But it's something that has to happen. There's a shedding that has to happen before you can move into living your authentic life.
Probably one of the biggest, most important realizations that I hope people hear is the shedding, because especially as an entrepreneur, but in anything you do in your life, is there you have to let go of what will people think. It's so hard because especially when you're failing in your business or you're just starting out, or you have to do things like you did, which are not conventionally what people would say is the ladder up to success. You have to find a way to not care, or if you care, to let it go very easily, because it is the biggest thing that will stop you. And it's very sad if you think about it, because ultimately, what does it matter what those people think in the end? It doesn't change anything for you except for your ego. Like, that's really it. And if you can
Yeah.
drop that, everything is possible for you.
Totally. I totally agree. I mean, I think that's, something that's so funny. I think back about of like starting as an influencer. I remember my dad going like, "You're not going to make any money doing that," and now he's like, "Oh my gosh, baby girl, I saw the new brand deal. I'm so proud of you." you know? People have to just really trust their intuition. When I launched my ebook, I had something come over me and I told my husband, I'm like, "Right, give me 3 days." And he's like, "What do you mean?" Like, I need 3 days of solitude, and I'm gonna write this ebook. I was like, I just feel it, like, people, they need this information, and I'm gonna do it. And that gave us, $10,000 in revenue in 2 months,
On
and
your
I
$7 ebook.
on my $7 ebook, I made $10,000 in 2 months, and I needed to make sure I had that money because we were applying for our, Greek digital nomad visas at the time, and we were incurring more fees than I thought we were going to, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, how are we gonna pay for this?" And I just think as an entrepreneur too, you just, like, when you get that fire underneath you, you're just like, "I gotta do it. I gotta do it. I gotta do it now." Trust your gut, trust your intuition, and it's okay, like, if something fails, and every time I've been, "Oh, I'm just not sure if I should do that. I'm not sure if I should charge that much. I'm not sure," every time I have that feeling of, like, it's not right, it's not sitting with me right, if I can't believe in an offer, it just doesn't do well. But if I know what I'm putting out there, I'm so excited, I'm super passionate about it, it never fails, like, but putting that energy behind it, it always takes off. So I think that's another thing that people have to think about as they kinda start getting into the space of being an entrepreneur is following your gut and listening to your intuition, even though other people may tell you differently, like, your audience best, you know what you're passionate enough about because the energy that you put behind something is so powerful.
So this is something that I don't feel enough people talk about, and I think it's because it doesn't sell, which is that you need to really believe in the price point that you're putting something out, and it has to actually be fair. And I know that lots of people like to say, "Well, you do 10 times what it should be, etc." But if you don't feel that that is what that price point should be, if you don't feel it, it is not gonna be successful, and it doesn't matter if someone else tells you, and blows my mind that you made 10K on a $7 product. Like, that shows the level of recognizing a need, the marketing, understanding all of these skills. That is huge, and it
Thank
also
you.
shows that it can be done. Like, it's really a super skill to be able to do something like that, but at the same time, it's like you knew what people needed, and you gave it to them at a really fair price. And I'm not surprised either, because every time you talk about that book, there's like hundreds of comments of people saying, "Give it to me."
There is, and I think it's so helpful for people because it just makes it so easy for people to get this information. They can read it at their leisure. And that was really my goal. And I just remember that weekend, I was just like, oh my gosh, I need to write this ebook. And I did. I spent 3 whole days like locked up in my room. Just making all of this, getting all this information out of my head and thinking, okay, like, oh, people would want to need to move their pets. Okay, what about taxes? What about, all these things that, we've incurred. Yeah, it's been a really good response. People have found it to be really helpful and it's really helped so many women, so many families start their journey.
It's incredible. I recommend, and we're gonna have a link, of course, but anyone who's thinking about leaving the States, wants to do this nomadic life, like it will be an incredible resource for you to do it. And having been on the other side of doing it, incredible. Like there's no comparison that experience. Final question here is what is something that you wish people asked you more about or about your journey that they don't?
The dynamic that me and my husband have created. Another reason why I decided to do what I'm doing now is because I felt like so many women are living this lifestyle, but yet behind the scenes, it's their partner creating the income for them to be able to have the space and the flexibility. And it was the opposite for us. You know, my husband had never worked remotely. He's always been, very labor intensive jobs. And so for him to get into this space was going to be really difficult. So one of the things that people ask all the time is like, oh, like, how did you convince your husband? And I think that what a lot of people don't understand is that it was really, really tough. I think one of the most challenging transitions that we went through was my husband basically saying, okay, I'm in the passenger seat, which is just as important because he is the support parent. He's the one who is, making the breakfast for our daughter and getting her off to school in the morning and all of those things that are so incredibly important. And people always ask me, like, I don't understand. How do you work full time? You're a mom, you're a wife, and you're also running your own business. And like, I just don't understand how you do it. And I'm like, it's my husband. He's a huge, huge reason why I can do all that I can do because he's doing so much of the things behind the scenes that nobody sees. I think that people really truly underestimate that, this is a really tough transition, especially because we're just ingrained to believe that it is the man who should be the provider. And my husband, it was really hard for him to say, okay, I'm going to step back. And he walked away from a six-figure job of, being a general manager of a restaurant. And people were like, what are you doing? I don't understand. And the faith that he has in me is just, it's like sometimes like I have the imposter syndrome, and he is like, no, because I trust you. I trust that you are going to be so successful. And I know that me taking this pause in my career right now to make sure that like you are able to blossom and to grow your business, I know you're going to do it. I know you can do it. That dynamic in the change of, be me being, the sole breadwinner versus my husband was a really difficult change, but we've settled into it now. But I think it's good for people to understand that.
What's your husband's name?
Harley.
Huge, huge applause and stand up for Harley because amazing for him that he did that for you, that he believed that much in you, that he's stepping forward that way. The way that you bring that up is key to your transparency because one of the things, and I'm not going to go on a rant because we're towards the end here, but one of the things that I do find frustrating is not just with people who are parents, but with people who are in relationships and they don't mention how important that partner is in the success and in the life that they've created. I will be transparent. I've got my husband. He has been amazing throughout this journey. I appreciate that you shared that because I know it's not the industry standard.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's, I think, people just really underestimate how much like you need that support. You need that support person.
I also don't want anyone listening who is single to think that they can't do this because that is not true at all. You 100% can. In a lot of ways, especially if you don't have a family, it can be a bit easier for you. But also, it's just the case of like if you're comparing to someone who does have that support, just know that it's there. Cause I feel like that must be so disheartening for some people that don't know or realize. And they're in one situation comparing to another.
Yeah, absolutely. But also too, I think one of the things that has been so helpful for me as well is also to just create community in this space, to connect with other social media influencers and content creators and other entrepreneurs as well. So if you feel like, if you don't have that like support person necessarily, like creating community is so important and anything that you want to do. I mean, I think, if you want to be successful at something, you find somebody who's already doing it well. I really advocate for people to like find community wherever they can so that they can, yeah, surround themselves with people who are already successfully doing what it is that they are trying to do.
This is honestly the ultimate secret, I think, for any success is whether you have a partner or not, whether you have a family or not, it's all about finding your community and your support people because no one has done it alone. No one. There's always different people who have supported them, cheerleaders for them, collaborations with them. every single person. And so the myth of like the solopreneur doing everything on their own and building their empire is a myth. It doesn't exist.
It doesn't.
I want to last question for you is for people listening that are really inspired by your journey and they want to know more. Maybe they want to get the ebook, maybe they just want to work with you directly. What are the ways that they can do that? How can they connect?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on all social media, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok, all at just Cara Celeste West. And of course, I've got tons of free content for people. Yeah, I would love to have more people a part of our family over there. And thank you so much for just having me on and being able to share my story.
Thank you for being an inspiration and thank you for being so authentic.